Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here. Welcome to another plugin knowledge session. In this session, we're going to check out a plugin from Boz Digital Labs called Pan Knob. Now, the purpose of this plugin is meant to be that it takes your normal pan function but enhances it to better suit headphones in a way. So they claim that when you pan something hard left or right on studio monitors, it sounds fine in the real world. As soon as you do it and you put headphones on, instruments can sound unnatural, they can sound out of place and make it uncomfortable for listening. And they're claiming that the purpose of this, the reason for this is because the low end is also panned fully left and right when you use a normal pan control in your DAW. So what they're doing is that when you pan with their pan knob, it basically takes the high range of the audio and pans that to the extreme setting that you place on the plugin, but it retains the low end more towards the center, and that is supposed to give you a more realistic sound on your headphones and a more comfortable sound on your headphones. They also talk about if you've got two guitars panned left and right, one's got more low end, it can make your mix sound heavy on one side if you use a normal pan control. So, all that sort of makes sense in a way, because I know when I master music, one thing I will generally do is use a plugin to reduce the stereo image of the low end, bringing it into the center, because I find that the low end has always spread out on somebody's mix and it sounds better if I tighten it up. So I guess the theory is that this plugin will do that before the mastering phase and do it on each individual instrument as you go. So let's get into it and see what it actually does. All right, so here we are in a mix and we've got the pan knob. As you can see, I'm just demoing this at the moment. It's a very simple plugin. There's not many controls. They're hiding the name here, but this is obviously pan. So this is the main knob here. We've then got a crossover and we've got this mode here, balance and law, and we can switch our left and right settings. Now this may change functions depending on whether you've got it on a stereo or mono track. At the moment, I have placed it on this guitar track and it is stereo. Right, so this is what our guitar sounds like right now. Just turn it up. All right, and if we were to pan that over to, say, the left, the guitar is fully over to the left, or we could have gone the other way. Now, if we bring that back to the center, and now let's bring in this plugin. Now, the theory is that with this crossover turned off, it acts like a normal standard pan control. Except this control does have 120%, so it actually, in theory, can go above 100. But I'm not sure whether that functions well in this state. Let's compare. I'll just move it. I don't hear much difference there. So with that state, it's just works like a normal plugin. So let's turn our crossover on now. So obviously what we're doing here is we're determining at what frequency we want the pan to affect and not really affect. And it's not a hard and fast rule. It's a gradual crossover here. They talk about it in the manual as being a gradual. So if you set it to 150 hertz, then in theory, anything below 150 hertz with a gradual level we will stay in the center and not pan. So in that case there, I did hear a difference between 100 and 120. So it does state in the manual that this going above 100 does only have an impact when you have the crossover on. So if you turn the crossover off, it does nothing. So we can prove that by going 120%. So you can hear a difference there, or if we switch between 100, okay, so to give you a true idea of what the plugin is doing, so if we set it to 100 and then we turn the crossover on and off, you should hear what the difference is. And what I failed to mention here is you can click on these little dots to jump quickly to an appropriate spot instead of having to move. So you've got center, 50%, 100%, 99 by that, and 120. And if we click this button, we instantly flick over to the exact opposite side. So if we had 120, 120 either way. So we'll set it 100% and we'll turn the crossover on and off. So this, with it off, works as a standard pan control, just as the same as your DAW would do. And then when I turn it on, that's where the magic is supposed to happen. So I probably should have mentioned, because they talk about headphones all the time, if you're not watching this video with headphones on, then you should, because you're going to get the true impact with headphones. You'll probably notice something if you're using speakers, but the true impact is on the headphones, and you definitely do hear a difference between the two. It sounds more comfortable with the crossover on, especially when you're listening to a single instrument on one side. Okay, but what if we want to have two pan guitars? Okay, so we've got two guitars. Let's turn the crossover off. So in theory, if I was to pan these fully left and right in a standard DAW, this is what I would have with two guitar tracks. And then if we turn the crossover on, so I can definitely hear a difference there, and it does sound more comfortable with the crossover on. So just out of curiosity, what would it even sound like if you went higher with these? Now this is probably a little bit weird of what we're going to do, but you know, let's just try things out. So the big question is, it sounds more comfortable in my ears doing this, but if you added all the other elements into this track, does it start to muddy up the center? And that is the big question with this sort of setup, because generally you're panning these things hard left and right because you want them out of the way of the center tracks. So if I was to say bring in the bass guitar, okay, and it's generally going to be in the middle. So let's just set our crossovers back to something reasonable. All right, so we're back to 150 hertz. And what I'm going to do is now I'm going to turn it off. So we've got our normal pan controls. We've got our bass down the middle. So to me, I do hear that it does muddy up the middle a little bit there. So I can see this plugin being quite useful when you've got individual instruments or just the guitars playing by themselves, gives a natural tone. But when you've got a bass that's sitting in the middle and some drums and things like that, then there's a chance that this may get a little bit in the way of that if it's keeping the low end in. Now, that depends on obviously how you mix the song as well, because if you filter out the low end of the guitars, then in theory they shouldn't get in the way of the bass. But it depends how you want to mix. You know, a lot of the time you want to get these things clearly out of the center, panned quite wide, and that frees the center up for the vocals, the bass, the drums, whatever, to be sitting there nice and clean. But with this crossover stuff, you're imparting some of the guitar back towards the center, which could cloud over the instruments that are in the middle. So that's just something to keep in mind, and I guess it's something you have to play with. So I can see what the plugin's doing, but is it going to work all the time? That's the big question. Now, what if we use these settings now, but we actually go for really wide? And again, remember, when you've got it really wide and no crossover, it's going to have no difference. So when I turn it on, we should hear what it does. So it's not as major as I thought it was. It's a bit more subtle than that. And if we turn the bass off, let's see if we can hear it a bit better. Without the bass track there, I'm actually finding that uncomfortable with headphones. It's just too wide, and it's really starting to give me a feeling of like vertigo type thing. It's like having something out of phase. So I'm not really keen on that, but it's something that you could obviously use as an effect in small doses. So we've got this pan law setting here, and I don't really want to go into pan law. It's very, not complicated, but it's something most people just leave. The DAWs all have their own set of what pan law they use. And the concept is that when you have something that's centered and you pan it left or right, do you increase the volume or decrease the volume? Because when you pan something left or right, especially in your ears, in theory, it gets louder. So you could decrease the volume as opposed to when it's in center mono and it's combined together. I'm not really sure why they're concerned about it, but so linear means there's no change. So the theory is that there's no volume change between you having it center and panned left. If we go 3 dB, so if we go -4, you hear it's getting louder. -6 is louder again. So it's supposed to compensate for the difference in volume you hear something that's in the center as opposed to something that's panned out to the side, and that's what the pan law is. No DAW that I know of would have a setting of linear. All right. Because you can hear to that, to us, or to humans, it sounds louder in the center than it does in the left. And that's why all DAWs are going to have generally one of these 3 settings by default in there. And it really doesn't impact you too much, because as long as you mix your song the way you want it to be and you don't change the pan law, then you're going to get the results. If you mix your song and you set your volumes for tracks that are in the left and right and in the center, and you go and change the pan law, it's then going to stuff everything up and throw your balance out. So I don't know many people that change this. I don't change it. I just use what's in the DAW and I'll leave it at that. But it's there if you want to do it. Obviously, they got some presets here. So they're referring to the old way as dumb. They've got a delay effect here. Extra wide natural. So they got a few ideas here of what they want to do. And natural, etc., etc. Okay, so this mode setting here only applies when we are talking about this plugin being placed on a stereo track. So if we use this plugin as is, and I've got it on these 2 guitars, so we've got, in theory, a stereo track. And they're pan left and right. Now we'll close that down, and I'm going to go to the actual guitar bus here, which is where our 2 guitar tracks are now going. And I'm going to place the pan knob on this track. Okay, so we've got it in center. So they state this setting here, when you use it on a mono track, will do nothing. You'll get the same results in either one of these. So what they're stating is that the balance mode works like a traditional pan knob. So if you've got stereo content, as we have, we've got 2 guitars, 1 pan left, 1 pan right. If we actually turn this dial, what it does is it turns down the right channel to make it sound like you're panning it to the left. So and obviously the opposite if we go the opposite way. Now what they're saying the difference is, if we go to this pan mode, what they're saying is that instead of it just turning down the right channel, what it actually does, if we move it over to the left, is it moves or pans the right channel across to the left. So it sends both signals out to the other side. or to the right. So if we go fully across to the left, and we'll just switch between these two to compare if we hear a difference. So I think what's happening there, because it's panning the right channel across to the left, what we're in theory doing is we're actually almost converting it to mono and then panning it over to the side. So we're getting a little bit of cancellation of the signal. That's why there's a big difference in sound there between the two guitars. And I think that's what's happening. It's sort of the sound I'm hearing there, that we have sort of like mono, gone from stereo to mono and then panned across to the other side. Now, obviously that's not technically what they're doing, but that's the result that I'm hearing come out of it. So there you go. There's the pan knob from Boz Digital. Let me know what you think of the plugin. Let me know in the comments if you think it's worthwhile and is it needed? Is it something that's really required? Did you hear the difference? And what did you think of it? Is it a useful plugin? You know, at the moment, a recording of this, it's on sale. So I'm very interested to hear your opinion and see what you think of the plugin. So hopefully it's been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.